Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Jacob, and this is episode 110. I'm here tonight with my co-host, Libby. Libby, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm really excited about the new year and feeling good and renewed. How are you?
Same, feeling good, feeling renewed, excited to kick off another year Kratom-free, which is always good. So feeling that. This week on the podcast, I had the opportunity to talk to Melanie. Melanie had a very interesting story with Kratom. She found it sometime in 2024, and she had a somewhat recreational relationship with the plant until she found 7-OH, and from there she had a very, what I would call, rapid rise and fall with the substance. But you all can hear all about it. It's a really good interview, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of the listeners. We seem to be getting a lot more people reaching out and a lot of guests now that have experience with 7-OH. And tonight for the intro, I'm going to hand it off to Libby in a second, but we wanted to kind of talk about just 7-OH and Kratom and the different types of Kratom and all of that, because I think there's, even among Kratom users, there can be a lot of confusion about products and all that fun stuff. So, Libby, you had done some research on this and are excited to talk about it, I think.
Yeah, I know we had an email from a listener who was wanting us to kind of deep dive into how much Kratom is in extract shots, how much Kratom is in the feel freeze. How do we compare these products? And it's kind of challenging to do so, but I did deep dive into that for today's intro. So what I found out is that the amount of alkaloid in Kratom leaf, like the powder, generally like the alkaloid that gets you high is about 12 to 21 milligrams per gram of powder.
So 12 to 21 milligrams of mitragynine.
Right, of mitragynine. Okay. There is also 7-hydroxymitragynine in there, but it's so small. The amount of 7-hydroxymitragynine in plant powder is very, very, very small. So when we're talking about extract shots that are like full plant spectrum extract shots that have many of the alkaloids in them, I don't know all of the alkaloids. I really just focused on the mitragynine and the 7-hydroxymitragynine.
I think there's like speciosa and something else that are active too, but yeah, mitragynine's the big one.
Right, the mitragynine's the big one, but the 7-hydroxy is the really potent one.
Yes.
So, I mean, those extract shots can be like 200 milligrams, sometimes 500 milligrams. So you have to look into what the percentage of the extract is. And then recently they've been extracting just the 7-hydroxymitragynine from the Kratom plant and putting that in its own press pills, I guess. I mean, they've been more popular since I've quit, so I'm not really very familiar with them. What I found out is that the 7-hydroxymitragynine is about 40 times more potent than mitragynine itself and about 10 times the potency of morphine in terms of the affinity it has to bind to the opiate receptors. In specific, the mu opioid receptor, which is the big one. So those seem to be really problematic because they're 10 times stronger than morphine. So that's probably why we're seeing such terrible addictions so quickly.
Yeah, I heard a spokesman from the Global Kratom Commission who was recently talking about 7-hydroxymitragynine and how it's a full agonist at the opiate receptors and how it's all the things you just said. And it's even different than an extract, as I understand it, because it's actually taking it a step further and using a more chemical process. I don't know the specifics about how they do the molecule transformation and get it to isolate. But in nature, it's like it's only a metabolite. So you have to actually take Kratom and then it's a metabolite that's processed through, I think it's the CYP34 enzyme, if I'm correct. Anyways, like you said, it's not much present in the actual leaf, and even in the really strong full spectrum extracts, like some of the brands that have a 4-letter word that starts with O. So it is really interesting. It's kind of almost I would say an opioid. I don't know what the classical definition is there, but it seems to be on par with hydrocodone or something like that.
I think the definition of an opioid is something that fully binds to the mu opioid receptor. And I keep telling people if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then I'm going to call it a duck when it comes to Kratom.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? If you've been through opiate withdrawals or Kratom withdrawals or I haven't been through specifically 7-OH withdrawals, but I assume they're very similar to all of them because they're all very similar. Kratom just has a little bit of other special help that goes along with it, which can make it even more problematic sometimes. But yeah. I forgot when we started this intro that was a question that we did get from one of the listeners. So it was a great question. So keep them coming. If you have questions that you'd like Libby, myself, or Charlie, or others to answer, we'd be happy to, and we'll do some research and dive into it. All right. Well, I think with that, we will get into our interview this week. And now you can hear my discussion with Melanie. Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is Jacob, and tonight on the podcast, we have Melanie. Melanie, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing good as well. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate all that you're doing, and feel free to ask me anything. I am an open book.
Well, I'm sure I got plenty of questions for you, but we'll start out with a couple easy ones maybe. How would you introduce yourself to someone like me that you just met? You know, things like age, profession, location, family stuff, anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm married. I have 2 very young daughters, 2 and 4 years old. They're 18 months apart.
Oh, wow.
I live right outside of Philly, so in the Philly suburbs. Go Birds. My profession, I'm in finance. I went to, the University of Scranton. Got a finance degree. My life is pretty average, I would say. How I would introduce myself is, hi, I'm Melanie, and I'm a mom, a full-time working mom. Some other things that maybe I wouldn't introduce, right off the bat. Something that, I struggled with was like alcohol in the past. Not so much of I'm an alcoholic, I have the shakes, I need to have a drink, but after I turned 30 and after I became a mom, really I just couldn't handle the hangovers anymore. I would just get these intense feelings of anxiety, or what I would call hangxiety, that would linger for days. So I've been battling with that for a while to either moderate or cut it out, or so I eventually decided to cut it out completely. And, I've been working on that. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit of background. And also I'm 34. I think I forgot to say that. So.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, so that's a pretty good introduction. What do you like to do for fun when you're not working or
momming and working? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do like to paint. That's one of my favorite things to do instead of scrolling or watching TV. You're kind of disconnected from that and you're focused on your hands and what you're painting. Same goes with reading. I just started doing that. Don't laugh at me, but I started doing bird watching.
Oh, that's cool.
Like an old lady, but yeah, I live out in the woods and I kind of like to bird watch a bit. In my 20s, I used to go out with girlfriends on the weekends and go to bars and stuff, but that's not in my life anymore. Those are the things that I like to do. I mean, I would love to travel more, but it's a little hard with the toddlers now.
Yeah.
Just being outside in general is great. So, cool. Yeah, those are some things that I like to do.
Great. Yeah, you got some well-rounded hobbies and pursuits. And yeah, artistic pursuits in general, they have a good way of keeping you grounded in the present. So that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I spend way too much time on my phone, I think, as does everybody. But yeah, I try to find hobbies that force you to get off of your phone or off of Netflix or whatever it is.
Yeah, same. I like to do stuff that's either interacting with people or in the outdoors for similar reasons. And just because it's good to do that stuff.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that's probably the fun stuff. So it sounds like before we get into the kratom aspect of things, you also have a bit of a history with alcohol and some struggles with that as well.
Yeah, the reason I brought the alcohol up is because that's what kind of led me down to this kratom path. Because I'm thinking to myself, well, how am I supposed to blow off steam you're at the end of a work week or you had like a really hard day and you're just like, I can't drink 3 glasses of wine because then I'm going to just be hungover. And I don't want to do that, but I just would like to take like a momentary mental vacation for like an hour or two.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a mind altering substance because for me, I guess my hobbies weren't really cutting it, So I was looking for ways of, all right, well, how do I use a mind altering substance that's not super duper dangerous? And I thought, okay, I've been curious about this for a while. So let me give Kratom a go. Let me give it a try because it's a plant and it's natural, yada, yada, yada. The whole works. I guess over the summer, I decided to go into like a vape and smoke shop. And I asked the person who was selling it to me, I have no idea what I'm looking at. What would you suggest? And actually, the first thing that he suggested was, because I'm looking at all these different powders and I know it comes in all sorts of different forms. And he said, probably the easiest thing to do is an extract. And so he gave me Hush, which was like it's just regular Kratom. So I did eventually start to get into the 7-OH stuff, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But in the summer, I felt like I hit the jackpot. I'm like, I found something. It doesn't give me anxiety. That doesn't give me the hangover. I can still function. Like my motor functions are fine and I can talk normally. I don't look or act drunk.
Yeah.
I'm still all there. The thing I noticed about those in particular is there's like sort of, not to glorify it, but there's sort of like a sweet spot. If you have too much of it, you get nauseous.
Yeah.
There's a way that your body says, okay, I've had enough. I was doing that over the summer, maybe July, August. And then the end of August, I went to a different vape shop and they didn't have what I would normally get. And the clerk said, no, we ran out of that, but is there anything else that you want? And I said, well, what do most people get? Because I don't really have a lot of experience with Kratom. Like I just started using this. And he goes, well, most people buy this and like buy the box. Like we're always selling these. What he sold me was 7-OH. And I asked him, well, what's the difference between 7-OH and regular Kratom? And he said, I think it's a little bit stronger, but I don't know. People say it's good. So he acted like, I mean, maybe he hadn't tried it, but I have some things to say about how that interaction went.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I started my 7-OH journey, which was much more complicated and horrific than what I was doing prior.
All right. Maybe before we go a little further, I just want to ask you 2 or so questions.
Yeah.
So the first one is, as someone who has a history of alcohol challenges and is almost 6 years sober, I know exactly kind of how that works. Yours is a little bit different. My one question around the alcohol issue was, it sounded like you weren't really having the typical like alcoholic consequences, but you were just maybe drinking a little bit more than you wanted and were really trying to get away from the hangovers.
Yeah.
Is that kind of more of a true statement?
Yeah, my body's changing and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like it's just not agreeing with me. I kind of felt like maybe I had a problem because I'm like, well, what's the point of having just one drink?
Yeah, got it.
I'd rather just have none because then I'm like, I'm just sleepy and like kind of wanting more. And so I'm just, I'm still on that journey trying to figure out where I sit with alcohol. But
okay,
I was definitely looking for an alcohol alternative.
Okay, got it. Looking for an alcohol alternative. That's what led you here. And in the early to midsummer through the August timeframe before you went to the smoke shop and they didn't have the product you were looking for and you tried the 7-OH, did you find your experience was recreational? You were able to just, use one of those extracts that you were taking one day and then go a few days and have it again? It was like just a healthy-ish relationship with the substance.
Are we talking about like the first kind of extract?
Yeah, the first part.
Yeah, that I would just do on the weekends. I would have like 1 or 2 and then I would be fine.
Okay, cool.
I would get this kind of euphoric feeling and I knew, what was too much. You can't take more than one extract. You're going to throw up. Like, it's just like, it's not going to work.
Okay.
I wouldn't say like I was dependent on it. I was using it recreationally and like in moderation. But I mean, I wouldn't go back to it now, but that's what my mind was telling me at the time.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. I was just trying to establish the progression pattern through your story to kind of link it together. So that's really why I was asking the questions. All right. So let's get back to where you were then. So you said August of this year, you get the 7-OH. And what was your first experience with that like? And then what happened next?
So I got my first 7-OH, and Jacob, I was hook, line, and sinker almost immediately. I thought I had just won the lottery. I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm at fault for that because I didn't do my research on what is 7-OH. And keep in mind, like these extracts, they had like more fluid in them, like fluid ounces. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting a little bit more. I drank the whole thing and it was a much better, I hate saying this, I really don't like talking good about it, but it was a really peak high that I wanted to be at. And I'm like, this is great. I found my new thing. This is way better than the other stuff that I was taking. And then I started to notice, like the next week and the following week, I'm like, today was so hard at work. I'm gonna do one after work. I'm not gonna wait till the weekend. I'll just do one now.
Okay.
And then that progressed into like, okay, let me do one before the girls go to bed, which was even worse to get me through witching hour because I have 2 toddlers and screaming and chaos. And, I just wanted that something to like help me power through. It gave me energy, but calm at the same time. So then I was like, okay, I'm doing them after work. And then I'm doing another one before I go to sleep for like myself. And then I would take like a day or 2 off. And then it got to be like, okay, I'm doing quite a bit on the weekends, not just one extract, but maybe 2, 3 on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. And then it just escalated really, really, really quickly.
Yep.
That's all I would think about during the day is when I could get to the 7-OH extracts. And I knew in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is headed in a direction that I don't think is good. But my addict brain kind of like tried to ignore it and just keep going. And another aspect of it is my addict brain was also forgetting, as a financial analyst, what I do for a living. I'm forgetting how much it actually costs.
Yeah.
And one of these little extract bottles is $20. You buy a case, it's $200. And then I'm flying through a case of that every 3 days.
Yep.
It escalated really quickly. But I was on cloud 9. I wasn't really understanding some pretty severe consequences are on the horizon.
Yeah. Well, number one, right? You don't have a history of opiates, so you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Because your story, I'm just going to be honest, it sounds exactly like how I felt the first time I got Oxycontin when I was in my 20s.
Right.
The same exact thing. You could just replace 7-OH with Oxycontin and you have the same exact story pretty much.
Yes. I had no clue. I was like, I found the diamond in the rough.
Yeah, you found your cheat code, and acknowledging all those feelings that you're starting to feel about the money, I know in the back of my head that everything that I'm feeling has another side to it, but you don't want to deal with those feelings because as soon as you deal with those feelings, you have to acknowledge everything that has to come with those.
Yes.
That's when you have to open yourself up to, okay, when I have to stop this stuff, I lose my access to my cheat code, and then what am I going to do?
Yeah, what am I going to do? And at that point, I mean, there was the silver lining in it is I didn't drink while I'm doing these things because I much preferred doing 7-OH over having a martini or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like a glass of wine. It did not compare. They're just apples and oranges.
Oh yeah, they're totally different things.
Yeah, it is an alcohol alternative, but at the same time, I had no idea what was about to come.
Okay. So it sounds like you first realized you were having a problem with this relatively quickly into your progression, probably a few weeks till you start to get to using it, semi-daily, then you're on to daily in another few weeks. So it's probably like fall time frame. Is that about accurate?
Yeah. So this is the kind of crazy part that I want to talk about because I knew, I'm like, okay, well, I know that kratom's addictive, but what happens if I don't take some, right? So like I'm working a regular business week and I go like, or no, maybe it was a weekend. Yeah, it was a weekend.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any. It's not that I was craving it. I just got really busy with the kids. At this point, I'm maybe like 5 weeks into my 7-OH usage. So it hadn't been like a super long time.
Yeah.
And so I, went 2 days without it. And I experienced this kind of fatigue that I have never experienced in my life. And I've been through 2 pregnancies with lots of fatigue, and I've been through newborn stage, and I've been delirious tired before, but this was a different kind of tired.
Yep.
And that was the only thing that happened. And I'm like, oh, okay. So withdrawal is fatigue. All right. Now I know what withdrawal is. So that's what I'm thinking that it is.
Oh, my sweet summer child, you have no idea what you're about to get into.
I really was living in total ignorance. I was like, I can handle that.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what it is, like if that's like, the withdrawal of kratom, that's like a no-brainer. I'm going to keep doing them.
Yeah. So how did that work out?
Yeah. How did that work out? And, maybe it was a blessing in disguise that I didn't know what was about to come. It was one particular weekend, and I was going through a very hectic day. I won't get into specifics, but it was hectic, and I was hosting people, and it was stressful, and I was slinging those extracts back as if they were like a 6-pack of beer. I think I took about 7 of them that day.
Okay.
Like throughout the day. That was a lot. That comes in like 50 milligrams, I think, in an extract shot.
Okay. That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot. It's a lot. And then that night, I went to sleep. And then I woke up 3 hours later with this sensation, like my legs, right? The restless leg syndrome.
Yeah.
But I was very unfamiliar with the feeling. I'm just feeling agitated. Like I got to move. I got insomnia. Like what's going on? And so I just took a little swig to go back to sleep. And I was like, that was weird. And then 3 hours later, right on the minute, I woke up again. Same thing. And I was like, all right, let me just take another swig because it's 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then again, 3 hours later on the dot. And I got really freaked out at that point because I think this is withdrawal.
Yeah, you're starting to realize how deep the dependence can get. Yeah.
I got so freaked out. And, my husband knew I was using them. And honestly, he didn't know how bad the withdrawals can be because, to be honest, the literature out there online or anywhere on 7-OH is really very limited because it is new.
Yep.
It's unregulated. It's new. I mean, for all I know, homeboy could be making this stuff in his basement and I'm taking God knows what.
Yeah, you don't know.
And so it was a Monday morning and I said to my husband, oh my God, this is what's happening. I'm waking up every 3 hours. Like I feel really sick. I got to get off of, I don't know if I can curse on here, but I was like, I got to get off. I got to get off of this.
Yeah.
And so he took it all and he threw it away. Everything. I didn't know like my last dose was going to be my last dose. And withdrawal had already begun. I was immediately into it. I'm trying to talk to my husband. I could start getting into the withdrawal process if that's where you want to go, unless you have some other questions.
No, yeah, let's talk about that. What was that like for you? And did you do anything to like help or how did it go?
So, it came fast and furious. I had no idea what kind of thing was about to happen to my body or to myself. I started puking. Like I just started puking and I couldn't stop shaking. Like that was the first thing that happened. And then it all came on really, really quickly. All the symptoms at one time. I mean, the diarrhea was just nonstop. I couldn't keep any water down. I'm doing this hot, cold, constant, like sweating. I felt like I couldn't sleep. And in my head, I mean, thank God my girls were at daycare at the time because I would never want them to see me like that. But, I just was screaming. Like I have a hard time explaining how much agony this was. It was just, I didn't know I didn't know what to do. It was agony combined with fear, combined with a lot of things. It just was so terrifying. My husband's trying to look online because I couldn't even get out a single thought. I couldn't get out a thought. I couldn't say a sentence. All I could do was just kind of rock back and forth. I couldn't sleep. And that went on for about 80 hours. And I had lost about 9 pounds in like just water from not being able to keep any kind of food or water down.
Yeah.
It was more painful. Honest to God, it was more painful than my labor experience with my first daughter, which was a 32-hour labor experience with a failed epidural. This was 20 times worse. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
Everything hurt.
Yeah. I think, the thing with 7-OH, and I haven't personally taken it. I did do some of at the time I stopped before these products were available, or else I absolutely would have 100% taken them, but was taking some of the very strong extracts before. But anyways, it's my understanding that 7-hydroxymitragynine has a much significantly higher binding affinity at the mu-opioid receptors than morphine. So
Yeah.
that's not even talking about strength. That's just its ability to latch onto the receptors and grab them, which is one of the reasons the withdrawal can be so absolutely terrible, as I understand it from this stuff. But not only that, it's got a 14 to 22% greater potency than morphine.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the classical opiate withdrawal. You're no longer in maybe kratom's like a diet opiate. Like, no, 7-OH is it can be classified as partial, but its withdrawal sounds just like a badass full antagonist opiate.
Like I pondered and I wondered, how did I get myself into this spot where I feel like I'm going through? I mean, I've never done heroin, but I'm like, this is like a heroin withdrawal.
It's basically the same, yeah.
I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how long it was going to last. And my husband was honestly, by just looking at me, he was fearful too. And he made me get in the car and go to urgent care. And let me tell you about my urgent care experience.
Yeah, how was that?
This was enlightening. I walk in and I'm trying my best to explain what's going on, but I'm having brain zaps. I can barely stand up. I need an IV bag, really, because I'm severely dehydrated and I'm going through kratom withdrawal. And the doctor that was there at the urgent care was sitting there trying to Google kratom.
Yeah, they don't know.
And I knew, I'm like, I'm not going to get anywhere here. There's no information out there. And I started to panic because I'm like, the doctor doesn't even know what this is. He suggested I go to the ER. And I was like, I don't want to go to the ER. I really don't want to do this. So I called my friend who's an ICU nurse. And she knew what was going on. And I asked her, what would happen if I would go to the ER? And she said, you would be doing what you're doing right now, but in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
And I find out later, much later on, after, I've been clean of this stuff for 70 days, so a little over 2 months. I find out now that people are using literally Suboxone to get off of this.
Yeah,
and
it's very common.
I was floored that I got myself into this position.
So how long did it take you to get through the withdrawal period? It sounded like 3, 4, 5 days.
That's a good question, especially for somebody who's listening that's like looking for a way out, or just honestly a perspective of what is this truly like and what do I have to do? The agony really lasted about 80 hours. So I'm going to say 3.5 days. And at that 3.5 day point, I started to feel this like headache that was like different than the headache that I've been having. And I just remembered, I'm like, I haven't had caffeine like in 4 days. And I'm a coffee drinker. And I'm like, I wonder if I can stomach like a half a cup of coffee. So I took a couple sips of a coffee. It stayed down. I kept drinking the cup of coffee and I got a whole cup of coffee down. And I feel like I was going downhill at that point, like in a good way. Like I was on an uphill battle and I'm like, okay, I think I'm getting a lot better at this point. I was able to walk around the block, the neighborhood. Meanwhile, like for the past 3.5 days, I was just wetting through my sheets in the bedroom. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't walk from room to room. It was terrible. On the 4th day, I still wasn't feeling great, but it was Halloween and I have 2 young children and I took them out trick-or-treating and that was really very hard to do. I'm trying to like not have diarrhea in the middle of the street. I'm trying to hold my daughter's hands so they don't trip in front of them. I'm trying to tell them to be mindful and thankful to everybody handing out the candy. But I did it. So by the 5th day, I was able to work.
Okay, good.
From home. I would have not been able to do that though. And I wouldn't suggest anybody who's listening to this podcast to do this. But I had a friend give me some expired gabapentin that she had for a case of shingles that she ended up not needing to use. So I used that for about 4 to 5 days until I noticed that the restless legs stopped, because there's no way I could have slept with the restless legs going the way it was.
Yeah, I think I've made it like 10 days with no sleep with that before. It's a real nightmare.
Yeah, so 100% I could have not got through that without the gabapentin. Even though it was expired, I'm sure it still did something. I wouldn't recommend borrowing your friend's prescribed medication, but I was in a desperate place. I used some other supplements that, I quickly found on, I was quitting kratom subreddit, like liposomal, vitamin C, the magnesium, the vitamins, I had a script for Klonopin, I had a script for Ambien, luckily. So that was helpful to use to get me through. Yeah, the physical withdrawal symptoms, the acute lasted for about like 7 days, maybe 6 or 7 days. The last things to go was the sweating, like the nonstop sweating, hot, cold flashes, and my gut was a wreck.
Yeah.
That was the last thing to regulate.
Okay.
Another thing that happened was it wreaked havoc on and sorry if this is too much information.
No, it's fine.
But it wreaked havoc on my endocrine system, because I completely skipped a menstrual cycle, which I have never done unless I was pregnant. And I was not pregnant.
Yeah, that's extremely common with women and opiates.
The amount of cortisol that was running through my body through withdrawal made me skip it. And I didn't even talk to you about some side effects that I was having of 7-OH that I didn't realize were side effects until after. I definitely had some side effects while using kratom that I did not connect the two until much later. But I wanted to answer your first question. So how long did the withdrawal last? So the physically 7 days. The second week was psychological hell. It was a panic attack that a benzodiazepine cannot fix.
Yeah.
It's like this roller coaster of emotions that just roll through you. And, I couldn't stop crying. It was a very spiritual experience, I want to say.
Yeah.
As well as emotional, spiritual, physical, like everything. It was heavy.
That was always the worst for me. I guess I have a battle-hardened history with physical withdrawals. Like, they suck, and after everything you said, I resonate with, because I've been through all of that, and it's hell on earth. It's like, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy's worst enemy. But for some reason, once you do it like 20 times, you just know what to expect, and it'll end. But there was something unique about kratom where like it has this mental hell that just never ends. It just keeps ongoing and ongoing. And for the listeners, just let me quantify that statement by saying it does end. It just takes a couple weeks, but it's rough.
Yeah. I mean, that second week, I want to say it was a lot of psychological stuff that was happening that kind of bleeded into the third week too as well. I signed up for the Philadelphia Half Marathon, and that was late November. And I had been training for that for a while. You know, I obviously, this withdrawal from 7-OH, I was thinking, okay, this is really going to put, you know, a wrench in my plans with training. But what actually did help getting through the withdrawals that second week was the training.
Yeah.
I woke up every morning having like the morning jitters, which I forgot to talk about, like waking up with a racing heart. I would get up, I would have a little bit of coffee and then run and run and run. I kept doing it. And by day 20, and I mean, for the listeners out there, on day 27, I ran a half marathon.
Wow, that's crazy.
13.1 miles. Yes, as agonizing as it was, I was able to push through and complete that marathon. Not very fast, but I completed it, you know?
That's awesome. That's amazing.
I had to take like a little bit of work off the first 3 days. I still had to be a mom, do all the things, pack their lunches, put them to bed, you know, give them a bath. I still had to keep my job. I have to keep this business running in my home. I still had to be a human being. And I kind of just pushed through that. But I think the hardest part was not knowing how long it was going to be. And then I found Noah's podcast and I heard about the feel free stuff and his experience. And I said, oh my God, that sounds exactly like what I went through. And I reached out to him. And to my surprise, he responded very quickly and welcomed me into the Feel Free sobriety chat. Even though I wasn't using Feel Free, I mean, I was going through the same type of experience. So they welcomed me in. I just love those people in there. And I love having support because I'm not sure I could have gotten this far without the support that I did.
Yeah, you have an interesting story because you don't have a history of substance abuse. You, in the scheme of things, like when you look at a lot of it's not really healthy to compare addictions necessarily. So that's not why I'm doing this. You know, you had a very kind of quick rise and then a fall, and it sounds like you haven't had any relapses, and you kind of like...
I have not.
It's really interesting because you did a lot of the things that addicts never want to do and put off, but you kind of just jumped right in. It's like most of the time when people wake up feeling withdrawals, like the last thing they're going to do is go tell their husband. They're going to hide it and try to run away and try to bury it. But you just kind of were like, forget it.
I was so scared because...
Yeah, I understand.
Here's the thing about 7-OH and maybe about Feel Free too. It's not a sustainable habit.
Yeah.
Financially, mentally, emotionally. It's impossible to pump out $20 every 3 hours to keep going. Like, I mean, how are you supposed to live that kind of life? What if you need to be on a plane ride somewhere?
Yeah, well, you're thinking rationally, which is usually not what someone does in the depths of their addiction.
Like, it's not sustainable. Like, no matter how rich you are, it's too expensive. It wreaked havoc on my body, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
So remember how I said I like to paint?
Yes.
So the 7-OH stuff, it would keep me up. Like, I was energized. I'm like, I'm good to go. And I would do these paint by numbers, like, intricately. I mean, I would do this for hours and hours and hours of paint by numbers. And I created some really awesome stuff. But I was just high on kratom and very, very, like, hyper-focused on doing those things. And I started to notice that my hands, both of my hands, like I got severe carpal tunnel to the point where I couldn't even like put a ponytail in my 2-year-old's hair. I couldn't braid her hair. I was dropping my mug. I'm like, why am I getting carpal tunnel? I'm only 34. What is going on? And I had no idea it was related to the 7-OH because, I mean, day 3 into my like detox, it completely went away.
Yeah.
And I, upon further research, obviously after I quit, I realized it causes like inflammation on your joints and just everything. There's not really anything it doesn't affect. It's actually very harmful, despite it being quote unquote natural. It's very, very harmful.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything natural about 7-OH because it takes a chemical reaction to produce those extracts. It's different than it going through your body and being processed by a liver out of straight powder, but that's a whole other discussion.
My main point is it's not a sustainable habit. So I think for people who do pick up 7-OH that might get addicted, they're not going to be able to stay addicted to it for long. They're either going to have to switch to something even more dangerous or quit.
Yeah.
Or something else. I'm not sure, because how are you supposed to wake up every 3 hours to dose? How long can you keep that up for?
It depends on how crafty you are, how much money you have. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised just talking from someone who was a broke addict in their early 20s. You'd be amazed at how much money you can find when you really need it. Anyways, I don't want to talk about that because it's a slippery slope. I did want to ask you just a couple more questions though around kind of your experience now that you're out of it. So you mentioned the chat group you're a part of. Are you doing anything else to kind of work through your addiction and keep yourself on the straight and narrow, or kind of how do you view things?
I got a therapist, and I started with a brand new therapist, and I made sure that she was specialized in addiction so I could talk about this freely. And I started talking to her about it, and I met with her 4 times. It's so far it's doing great.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm in the live like WhatsApp chat, like sobriety group, which has been massively helpful. Even if I'm not participating, but just reading about it, like watching other people inspire other people, it's still keeping my mind engaged, because I know how it goes when you kind of just like let it go for a while. And I won't lie, I still have like that creeping thought of like, what if I just have one, right?
Yeah.
Kind of keeps me on the straight and narrow to follow people's relapse stories. Like, hey, this is what happened to me, so I'm educated on what happens. Part of me is a little bit like, with alcohol at least, I'm like, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to be hungover, dehydrated. I'm not going to feel good, blah, blah, blah. But with 7-OH, I have no idea what's going to happen. And that scares the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way I can get through that again. I can't. I don't have it in me.
Yeah, you're doing the right things to stay connected. And, it's important to move on from a substance, but also ensure that you're close enough that you remember the experience you went through and know that the negatives are much more than the positives.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely crucial to keep maintenance as part of the process of staying clean off of it. I mean, maybe not think about it 24/7, but like once in a while, kind of check in with yourself about it, reflect on it, and just like some thoughts on it, doing a lot of like inner work and thinking about myself and like myself on Kratom, like what I was trying to do. I guess I was just getting rid of this pain that I was having, whether it be like physical pain or mostly like emotional pain, like, you're stressed, you're frustrated, this, blah, blah, blah. And then you take the high. But it's okay to sometimes have emotional pain. And there is somewhat of a beauty in emotional pain as well, because having emotional pain gives you the capacity to have compassion for other people. It gives you the ability to have empathy for other people, to care for, to love. Like, that's the whole point of us being here. And like me on Kratom, I'm not that empathetic, compassionate, loving person that I know as Melanie. I'm just a hollow shell of myself that's just trying to get rid of whatever's between my ears in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm not going in the right direction spiritually. And like that's my own take on it. That's not part of my soul goals.
Yeah.
That's not where I want to be. That's just like my thought on it. And it's okay to be uncomfortable sometimes and have anxiety sometimes and feel sad sometimes.
Yes. You're hitting on a realization that I had not too long ago too, which is that, there's this whole like, I don't know what it is. I don't know, it's a societal expectation or it's like conditioned into you from you're young that you always have to be happy. You have to strive for happiness.
Right.
Look at any ad on TV. It's all about like good feelings and generating this like good feeling. And well, that's not life. I've realized this. I'm striving to be okay. Like, I'm not striving to be happy. I'll be happy sometimes. Some days I'll be sad. But I generally just want to strive to be okay.
Some days you're surviving and then some days you're thriving. And that is a part of life.
Exactly.
And if you're like totally numbing it out with Kratom, you're not really growing as an individual.
No, and you're not going to experience true joy because it's muted, just like you're not going to experience maybe that deep pain you're trying to escape from, if that's one of the reasons why you're using, but you're also not going to get the joy that comes with being sober and experiencing something without being numbed out to it.
I would still consider myself an early kratom sobriety because I still think about it.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I am in this stage now. I'm having a hard time experiencing true pleasure in like a beautiful sunset or my children laughing at something, actual true pleasure. I've been feeling very flat. And now I know with the support group that I'm in, that is a common thing to happen like the first 90 days. Shout out to Meredith if she's listening to this, but she's been telling me it will come back. You will feel pleasure at some point. But I have completely effed my brain pathways up. They're fixing itself. It takes a while to heal.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Being self-aware of that and understanding that it's okay to feel flat right now.
Give yourself some grace.
Yeah, and like grabbing another 7-OH is not the answer. That's not the direction to go in. It's not the answer. And I just feel like a few things I'd want to say on it is I feel like number one, if I had the knowledge of what 7-OH is and how potent it is and how addictive it is, I would have never touched the stuff. I had no idea. And I consider myself to be somewhat of an intelligent person, but I just don't think there's literature out there. There's not enough experience. There's not enough people talking about it. The bottles I was buying, they don't say anything about addictive chemicals. The clerk I was talking to, the person who sold it to me, didn't say anything about it. Didn't give me caution. Nothing. And every time I went in there, I mean, a coupon reward. I went to a different vape shop. They were handing out samples, 3 samples of 7-OH. So I appreciate what you're doing here and making it available to other people to have this kind of knowledge and giving me that platform to talk as well, because it feels kind of pointless to go through all of that without helping somebody else.
Yeah. Everything you said is all things I resonate with too. I ended up trying this stuff because of similar reasons to you, and there wasn't a lot of literature out there on what it could do, like you said, and it's changing very slowly. There's a whole industry that's trying to make sure that it doesn't change, and all we're trying to do is, we're not here to demonize the plant or make it illegal or anything like that. We're just trying to spread knowledge and help people that are trying to get out of it and let people know that like this is what can happen. For every story of kratom being helpful and useful and helping people with pain, and I'm sure that there are people that it does help, there's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these.
Yeah. For example, when I first started using them, and I didn't start at 7-OH, I started using the other stuff. I often wonder where I would be if I just kept using those hush extracts or just regular kratom. Like, where would I be? Would I continue to use them? Would I continue to use them long term? I'm not really quite sure.
Yeah.
I'm sad that I got mixed up in all this 7-OH stuff because it was really dangerous and horrific and traumatic to go through. But I'm following you with this industry because I've already seen stuff on my Instagram. I mean, there's new stuff coming out, Shot of Joy and this and all different kinds of stuff that's like marketed as an alcohol or alternative.
Yeah.
I think that 7-OH would be probably a good step for someone getting off actual real dope, not for a mom of 2 that's looking for something else besides a glass of wine. Yeah.
I think we have better tools already with Suboxone and Methadone for people that are struggling with opiate addiction and dope because they're longer lasting. And
there's other ways to get off that too.
Yeah, they're better medical assisted treatment. But anyway, it's a very slippery slope. I think with you, I'll just be honest. This is my personal opinion. I know people might differ, but I think addiction is a disease. And I think if you're predisposed to the disease, you may go your whole life and it never really affects you. But I think for most people, you didn't stop drinking because maybe you had consequences, but you probably could have in the future. It sounded like you had a relationship with alcohol that could have been problematic. So it all leads to the same place. Some of us just get there faster or slower than others, just a matter of speed.
Yeah. I appreciate the transparency in that. And yeah, I'm one of those people where I took it too far. Took it too far with booze. And I used Kratom to get off the booze and took that too far,
Yeah, but in the scheme of things, I think you could go a lot further, but don't. You're good where you are. Just between you and I.
Stop while I'm ahead. Yeah, totally.
Well, I have 2 more questions for you, and then I'll let you ask anything you may have on your mind or anything else you want to talk about. So my first one is kind of a light one. I always ask like one light question. So do you have any pets? And if so, what are their names?
That is a fun question for people who actually have pets.
It's okay.
But I don't have any pets.
Well, what's your favorite movie?
What's my favorite movie? Good one. Does a show series count?
Sure. What's either one?
The Sopranos. That was so good.
I actually just rewatched that not too long ago. It's very good.
That was my favorite.
And you were going to say something else before I cut you off. Sorry.
No, I would love a dog someday, but I don't think I can handle the responsibility of another breathing thing at this point. Yeah. Having 2 toddlers is very draining. I love them so much, but they got to be old enough to ask for a dog.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I guess my last question would be, if someone was to come to you and, they were struggling with 7-OH, if you just could give them one top tip, what would your one top tip be for them?
It depends on where they are. If they're considering it, I would say don't touch it. If they've already kind of dabbled in it, I would say stop where you are right now. Just stop. I also don't know, because this stuff is so potent, I would suggest to just go cold turkey. Tapering sounds like a nightmare. If you haven't touched it, don't. And if you touched it, just stop.
I think those are really good pieces of advice. I would give the same. No more questions from me, but is there anything else you would like to talk about or questions you want to ask me or anything like that?
Yeah. So how long have you been doing this podcast for?
I joined the podcast team in July of 2023. So almost 18 months now.
That's awesome. I really appreciate what you're doing and appreciate providing your personal experience as well. I just think that there needs to be more information out there, and what a great way to get it out there. My other question for you is, have you met anybody else that has kind of messed with 7-OH or are stuck?
Yes, I've talked to a few people that have used it, quit, have used it, and are still stuck on it, still trying to get off. I haven't met anybody in person, but I have interviewed, I think, 1 or 2 people about it on here, and I've had a couple conversations with folks online.
So in your opinion, do you think this is probably the worst of the worst that's out there in terms of Kratom?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll answer the question in a little bit of a longer way. My viewpoint on Kratom is, I don't think that it should be illegal necessarily. I don't think prohibition works. I don't think it does. I don't know what the right answer is, because I don't think open access to every drug on the planet is a good idea either. But if it were me, I'd probably regulate Kratom powder, similar to marijuana.
I would agree with you there.
But I think 7-OH, it's more on the lines of something like a hydrocodone or something like that. So it seems to me, if those products belong behind a pharmacy counter, I think this one probably should be back there too.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, if you're taking this, you're a bit of a guinea pig, because it used to be, up until I think last year was when those extracts first came out, or maybe it was 2022 at the end of the year. I don't know, or 2023.
Yeah, I would assume that they're new.
They're really new, yeah.
There's nothing out there on it.
But before they hit the market, the only way that you could get 7-OH in your body it's a metabolite of kratom. So you literally have to have kratom process it through the liver and the enzymes, and then it would be a metabolite. So in my opinion, you've crossed the boundary of an extract. You could argue where that boundary is, but you're using chemistry essentially to isolate this compound and putting it in pills with binders and all. It's no longer, in my opinion, a botanical product. It's crossed the Rubicon into a pharmaceutical or a drug, depending on how you want to call it.
100%.
So that's my opinion. It's going to be interesting how regulation happens over the next couple of years or decade,
Yeah, I do predict over the next year or two, there's definitely going to be some more people coming out of the woodworks. And what I would say to them is there's a beautiful life on the other side of it. And I'm still trying to find it, but I know it's there. It's just this stuff is dangerous.
Yeah, it's not going to lead you anywhere good.
No, it's not.
Well, Melanie, I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. I think your story is going to resonate with a lot of folks. I think it's interesting.
I hope I'm helpful in some way. And also, I would love to help any way I can. If somebody wants to talk to me about my experiences or reach out for help, I am an open book. You have my contact information. Yes. And thank you for having me on your podcast. My first time ever being on a podcast, which is very cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Again, thank you very much.
Of course, you're more than welcome. We're super happy to have you. And if anybody listening would like to chat with Melanie about anything she offered, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to put you in touch.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Jacob.
Thank you. I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.